Kathy, when you're ready.
We're ready.
All righty. Do you want to do Pledge Allegiance first? Tim, you want to start us off there?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And a roll call, please, Kathy.
Walter?
Here.
Chicken?
here.
Here.
All righty. I called the October 23rd Streets Committee meeting to order, and I guess I did that already. But so first project on the list, I guess we'll probably try to stay in order this time. There's only 12 things, or 11 things. Oak Meadow Drive project. Alan, could you give us an update on that, please?
Yeah, Oak Meadow Drive. Okay. Sorry about that. With Oak Meadow Drive, last thing we discussed was getting the mod for Hickory. We got the resolution for that, got an agreement for that, and Jobs is currently working on bringing the Hickory Drive up to about a 50% to match where we're at with the rest of the project on Oak Meadow. And I have the 50% set in my hands for review. I have not gotten around to reviewing that yet. So that's pretty much where we're at, just bringing that up so everything's at 50%. I don't have a specific schedule on that yet.
Okay. I know when we had the special meeting for the budget, there was some confusion on the in lieu of, I'll call it for the lack of a better term, in lieu of contribution to the project. When we talked about whether the path was in, not in, did you go back and look through your notes on that by chance?
Yeah, there were two things that were related to this, because we had on the Taylor Road Trail the in lieu of, which seemed to have been a communication error between me and Jamie. We've taken that off, and we're going to fund that out of the 205, which isn't a problem.
Okay.
And then for this, we added the fee in lieu in, and then on that, I believe it showed 650,000 at the top, and then the lines down below only added up to 600,000. So there was a slight clerical error between me and Jamie there. So right now we've got it set for 700,000 for the total project. 65,000 of that is the fee in lieu, and the remainder is out of the 201, and that would cover all the costs, including the Hickory Drive drainage, all of Oak Meadow Drive drainage, the paving, as well as the construction administration and inspection.
Okay.
And the path.
Yes. Sorry if I didn't say that.
You may have, and I just missed it.
Okay, so that's the entire project,
Yes.
including all of the, no, that's not including the engineering, right? That engineering was 2017.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. I guess I'll open up for questions on that. If anybody has any questions.
I have one. What is a 50% mod?
We did a modification to the contract. The original contract didn't include the drainage going down Hickory, and we had to do a modification to that contract of 17,000.
I don't remember the
Somewhere in
numbers
that
off the top of my
ballpark.
head.
It's
That's
something-
okay. I know exactly what you're talking about now. I was actually thinking that the modification wasn't in the contract. I was thinking it was to Hickory
15?
in some way.
15, yeah, the
It was
15,000.
15,000. Yeah, it was just a modification to the project, and then we're getting that all to 50%.
Okay.
I guess my other question would be, assuming that everything goes as planned, what's your kind of target start?
I would say summer,
Of
summer of
18.
Hopefully earlier than that if we can get through the plans and everything earlier than that, but I would anticipate summer would be a pretty good estimate.
Just a quick question. Do you know if BJ's joining us tonight?
No, he's at the.
Oh, that's right. He's at the thing.
conference
That's
in
right. We told him we
Texas.
didn't need him. That's right. I forgot about that. That's probably on tape. He'll hear that. Okay. I don't know if we need any kind of, any other questions on that? I don't know if at this point, I don't feel like there's a recommendation to be made, maybe to the budget, I guess. But I guess we can talk about that at the next budget meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on in the agenda to the Kylemore drainage.
Okay, and we got the final report from Strand last week. I put that on to the committee members for review. There was, it only differed in the draft where it addressed the original, what we believe at least was potentially the original drainage path as shown on GIS. It looks like it would have went straight south at one time, whereas now it all goes to the west. So they did address that in the report, not terribly extensively. I believe their consideration was that restoring that original drainage would kind of be different than what it is now, and that might cause us more problems than if we just updated what's there now.
Okay, that was going to be one of my exact questions. You know, could it be so in the report they said some time ago when Graham was built, there was a disruption in the drainage pattern that looks like it bisected the natural drainage to the south and didn't allow for it to go. And we know that it overflows, tops that road sometimes when a heavy flow. So one of my questions was, does it make any sense to think about a culvert across Graham to reopen that drainage pattern? And that was one of the things they didn't really address in here. I mean, it didn't look like that was, maybe they've already looked at it and said it couldn't happen. Is that what you're saying, that downstream there's impediments there's different problems if we open that drainage pattern back up?
I think that's it right there. There'd be different problems in restoring that. Because right now everything goes to the west, so it's almost like even though that was the original pattern, at this point if we changed it, then we would be changing that, and then that could be more problems than it's worth. I guess that's the way I took that.
Okay, and then I've got a couple other questions, but I'll let anybody else on the committee have anything they want to ask on this?
Not yet.
Okay, so in the report, they talk about the online pond, essentially the pond that was built that intercepts this water. And the landowner built this pond and has upgraded it in the past, and now is actually put some type of control structure on it that modifies it so that it doesn't take, or that it doesn't hold as much water, or doesn't allow for much water to come that way.
Control structure, yeah, so it doesn't allow, he can control how much water he allows into it, which I think currently he's plugged it off.
I think they said, which are likely impeding the natural flow path of Muddy Fork Creek. So, first question there is, online pond structures, do we have a problem with that? Do we have anything that says, from besides state statute, but do we have anything in Pataskala ordinances that say can't do that? They can't do that.
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not sure how long that pond's been there, but I think it's been there for a good while, like probably before
they were Pataskala.
Probably before it was Pataskala, right.
So then I'd go to state statutes, to the revised code, and the revised code says you have to accept upland water, and it's the volume, not the rate, but you have to accept the volume. You can't impede and back water up on your upstream neighbor.
Right.
So is this at least worth looking into to say to this neighbor that, couch this all in, is this worth $300,000 rough numbers if you go with the cheapest one?
Right.
Seems to me if he's impeding the water, and that's what's backing it up onto the neighbors who are having problems, and therefore causing this overflowing topping event, and maybe they're not all connected, but it sounds like he's done something, or that property owner's done something to now cause water to overflow or overtop Graham.
Potentially.
Just that's what I'm reading in the report. It sounds like that's what's kind of happened.
I don't know that the addition of the pond, I can't say for sure, and I don't think they said whether that actually caused the topping of Graham Road. When we first started looking at this, yeah, the channel kind of runs into his pond. He's piped it from the pond to the culvert out by the road. So the challenge would be one that's already going across his property. Should he have ever done that? My guess would be no if we looked into that on the ORC. Regardless, I think this still, with whatever we did there, I think it would still overtop or at least come out onto Graham Road, no matter what we did with his property.
Okay.
Unless, like you said, I guess if we restored it to the original drainage pattern that we believe to be the original pattern with the culvert, that might answer the question. However, it's fairly shallow through there, so I doubt we'd be able to get any size culvert in there and get any cover on it. It might work. We'd have to look.
The troublesome sense I have in here is in the years since the subdivision was built, and I'm not saying the subdivision did anything right here, because they look like they've done their part to not help this situation. In the years since the subdivision was built, the owner of the Fife Pond has taken steps to decrease the flows of the wetland from flowing into his private pond. Well, so you're saying he's bypassing his pond with that water flow, or is he just stopping it so that it can't come on his property?
He has stopped it so they can't come on his property, and what that ends up doing is it bypasses along the property to the east, which had been in a foreclosure, I think, but that is actually sold, and there are people there now. Just bought the place not too long ago. I think they're actually going to demo the house and build something new. But,
Wow.
so that this part of the idea with putting drainage in was being able to get an easement from that property, which
The foreclosed property?
question, yeah,
Yeah.
which is now owned by somebody.
Yeah, that was kind of getting to that was kind of one of my last questions, is how confident do we feel we're going to be able to get from this now isolated wetland area to Graham ditch, to the ditch along Graham Road? Have anybody talked? Well, now you've got an owner, so we can talk to him.
I talked to the fellow that the wetland is on his property. I talked to him last week, and he's just let me know that those people had bought that. So I have not had an opportunity to get in touch with them yet. I actually asked him to give them my number and asked them to call me when they have a chance.
Okay. Anybody else on the committee have any questions? I guess I have I have kind of this global question.
Just a brief question with the house that was foreclosed. Does it still have a water problem, though, from all of the drainage? From what I understood, that house was, and that property was soaking wet
Well,
for years.
Evidently, they had where that house is, and then to the west of the house is where they had their septic, and then there's kind of a swale that runs along the west side of that property between Mr. Fife and that property. My understanding from things I've gathered, what people told me, is that septic tank had been submerged in water, and that caused a problem for the house. I had not ever heard anything about the house actually flooding itself. When I'd been out there and the water was halfway across the road, that there wasn't water up by the house that I noticed or saw.
Okay.
Tim?
No, I'm okay for now.
So my the last kind of question is, under the Cowmore subdivision, and I know they allude to here that we don't know if they had permits to be in there filling, we don't know if they had,
There is a little bit more information. We did
Okay.
get a stormwater study that was done back when this was built, roughly 95, 96, that said that no retention facilities were necessary. It wasn't a very in-depth stormwater review, but it did come to the conclusion that none of those were necessary. And I'm sorry if I hadn't shared that previously.
Is that I'm sorry.
Yep, that makes a little difference. So detention really isn't the issue; it's the outflow. It's the how do you control? Although I guess a suspect under heavy rains, detention seems to be the issue.
If you talk to Mr. Fife, he would say that detention is the issue because that he did not have this problem supposedly before the subdivision was built.
Well, it seems like through this research, we had the subdivision. We had a pond when we don't know when it was built. Then we had a subdivision filling areas to build buildings. Then we had Mr. Fife deciding to build dikes, and now we have a problem on Graham Road. When did the problem on Graham Road? Do you know approximately when that might have started?
I've never heard anybody allude to when that would have started. And
Okay.
I actually thought Mr. Fife cut the dikes.
No, the neighbors cut the dikes.
The neighbors cut on the east, or is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The neighbors cut the dikes to try to get the water to release.
Right.
Which they probably shouldn't have gone on his property to do so, but
Well, they did it to the east.
Oh,
That's
to-
how they met the folks that bought the other property. Yeah, I don't think.
Welcome.
I think it was kind of a tense meeting from what I understand.
I would imagine so.
okay. So, Alan, I guess my big question is, if you looked at this from a responsibility, what is your recommendation for the city to actually do as a responsible party to this? What is maybe your recommendation for others to do as responsible parties to this? And what do you think the law says the other parties have to do? Those are my three parts to my one question.
Okay. Let me think on that for a second.
Okay.
I put this one at the top of the list of the drainage problems because of the way that it was affecting. We've kind of got a swamp back there. The guy's house was getting close to the electrical boxes. There's obviously a dispute between the neighbors, and it seems like that subdivision had some kind of effect on what's happening here. I guess before I answer the question, the challenge I see is with Mr. Fife, that original creek bed looks like it runs right through his property. Should he have built right there and closed it in the way he did? Probably not. Would that, and should there have been some kind of detention on Kyle Moore? Potentially by today's standards, probably. What they were 20 years ago, maybe not. So to require Mr. Fife to do it, and withstanding all that, we still have the road flooding. And that's the other reason this went so high on the list, is because the road's flooding, and we want to keep that from happening. So is there a responsibility of anybody in Kyle Moore or Mr. Fife? I guess I don't have an answer to that. Is it specifically the city's responsibility? I don't know that I have an answer to that either. It seems like with the way that subdivision happened, and there's certainly no way that I'm aware of to go back on the subdivider. I think they've been out of business long since. So this was just me looking at a solution to solve the problem. Are there other ways?
Yeah.
Probably. I guess another thing, part of this is the drainage along Graham Road to the west would be upgraded as part of this as proposed, and that seems like it needs to happen to keep the water off the road. I guess regardless of if we tried to go back on the property or not, and maybe that's a solution. We just do the part along Graham Road where we have the drainage problem, and leave the rest of it to.
Let them work it between the neighbors, essentially, to bring it out to that Graham Road, which it is an idea. I was more along the lines looking to the south to say, can we cross Graham with a culvert and get it to come to release, to get it from flooding to go down its normal path.
Yeah.
And let them bring it there. But I think I understand we don't want to cause more problems by doing something like that. And if it is necessary to the west, although if we've done something when we built Graham Road to back up that water to the west, then I guess we should relieve that problem. Okay.
Guess I have
Go ahead.
a couple questions. The original creek bed, it's running south, right?
As evidenced by GIS. GIS shows a storm.
Is there an obvious point where it intersects Graham? And what was there before, if there was a creek bed and then there's a road?
I think this was a kind of like, what do they call them, like a ephemeral stream, like it didn't lay wet normally, would be my guess.
Okay.
So there's just more of a depression than a stream bed.
Okay.
I really can't speak to that. I know that there is a little bit of a low-lying area that's out there now, but it's on the south side. It'd be difficult to call that a creek bed from what I've seen.
And by the lay of the land, by the topography, it doesn't continue to an obvious creek going south.
Correct.
Okay.
It's,
Well, they're all headwaters to the Licking.
South Fork.
Yeah, South Fork.
well, yeah, Muddy Fork and South Fork, correct.
Right.
But I'm saying when you're standing there, you don't say, right there's for some reason it disappeared and, if we run it that far right there, it's obviously going to dump into another creek and you're saying that doesn't exist.
It doesn't appear that way. I mean, I haven't, looking on Google Earth and looking on GIS, where that is, you don't really see any kind of channel.
You may have made mention, who was it that told them Kylemore did not need a detention pond? Was that a professionally,
That was a professional study.
Yeah, it was.
that the developer of Kylemore hired?
Yes.
Okay. And then the other question I would have is how far west do you think that needs to go?
There's to where existing outfall is, I'd have to look at the,
I don't know, do you have the report in front of you?
yes.
On the second page, there's kind of is it just that listed perennial stream at the far left-hand side of the picture?
Yes.
Okay. So it would need to run from here to here.
Yeah, it's either they go that way or we're going to intercept it and come up and go this way. It either goes this way or it goes this way.
And it currently goes to the west, so that's what I'd base that off of. That's what we base that off of. And I don't know if it had.
So based on what Mr. Walther just showed me, he said we have two options. One is to run it west along Graham.
Mm-hmm.
One is to intercept it up at Kylemore and run it west.
Yeah.
And do we know that perennial stream will, it's going to run up to Aberdeen and then tie on right here? Okay.
Right, and that would be the more expensive option. Running up to Aberdeen.
But that then also presupposes if that drainage is going to go in there, the pond will not be to work the way that is designed to work. The natural outflow from the pond would be to the drainage that we're putting in.
Yes.
And are we solving the problem if the structure that limits the incoming water that's now backing water up into the wetlands is not removed?
So the way that, I'm not sure how well it shows it on here. I guess it doesn't really show it that well on here. The idea would be to try and get an easement from the people to the east of the Fife property and put a structure in the wetland / pond that's behind Mr. Fife's pond.
And
Put a
just
structure-
circumnavigate it
What's that?
and just
And just go around it, yes. And if we put a structure on there, we can, to some extent, use that wetland / pond almost like a retention pond, where we can have a low flow outlet and then high flow, which it'll back up a little bit, and we can use that as storage to help prevent flooding downstream.
Alan, have they looked at this enough to know how deep this storm would be? Did they run a profile? Have you seen any kind of profile on this?
They have surveyed it. I think that we do have an idea of how deep it would need to be. It's not terribly deep. There's not a lot of fall out there. And so and more or less we follow the existing ditch and culvert. We'd probably hit a deep spot. There's a slight rise between the Fife property and where we outlet. Through there, it'd probably be no more than 8 feet deep, I would say. And then at the pond coming out of there, it's probably only 4 or 5 feet deep.
So let me ask this question. If we were to only do drainage along the roadway, forget about going to the pond, only do drainage along the roadway, how much deeper is this than the ditch that's out there? And obviously, if there's a small ditch out there, how much deeper is it than that? Is it 2 feet below that?
How much deeper is the storm below
Correct.
the existing?
Correct.
Not much. I think because there's just not much available fall. Where that goes to from the ditch, outlets into the stream there to the west.
Right.
And I think we've got to pretty much match that same outlet point. So the piping in is partially because there's some pipe already there. And then where there's not pipe, it made sense to add some pipe just to make sure that we could get all the way back. Because with the concrete pipe, or whatever type of pipe, you can go, as you know, go shallower with pipe than you can with a ditch. With a ditch, you can get down to 0.5% is really pushing it, 1% is good. With a pipe, you can go 0.3%, so you can get a lot shallower and make it run longer.
So one of the thoughts that I was kind of going to throw out there was, a ditch with a low flow pipe in the bottom of it. Did anybody maybe to make the pipe size smaller? Would you ever consider going with a ditch with a pipe in the bottom of that ditch? Obviously, where there are driveways going across it, you have to pipe that part. But to use something smaller in the ditch itself to help, on very low rain days, but the ditch would handle the high flow part of it.
You're saying basically put like an under drain below the,
Maybe bigger than that. Maybe
Okay.
like a 12-inch line, maybe like a 12-inch under the ditch to give it enough volume to move that high flow water.
I haven't said that we've considered that. We could look at it. My guess is that we wouldn't have the outfall available because I think that the ditch goes into that channel to the west fairly low.
So when you're putting a 30-inch in there, I assume most of it's 30-inch, you're basically closing the ditch up.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out where you were setting your elevation to get across there. Okay.
Well, and yeah, and some of that, because there's 800 feet, alternate route 2, of ditch clean out. So some of it we would be leaving the ditch and not piping it in.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay. Any other questions from the committee?
Yeah, what you just said right there, where that traverses under Graham and then goes up the other side, is that the preferred method because there's no driveways, it's already there, the ditch is already there?
Yes, I think is the short answer. So out of the two alternatives, going where it already is the cheaper. We wouldn't need right away, and it's the way that it already goes. Versus crossing over, once again, we're pretty much following the same drainage path, just making it deeper where we could and piping it in because some of that pipe's is pretty old.
No.
The Warren Point Lane ditch that's in here as an alternate, 17,500. That's in the subdivision, correct? Warren Point? I was trying to understand what are we talking about doing there? It sounds like at this cul-de-sac bulb, they're saying that there's problems around that?
That is something separate, and sorry, I forgot to mention that.
Okay.
That is another resident about, just over the rise from where this is at, down Graham Road, where there is in the Callamore subdivision, there's kind of a ditch that comes down, and there's supposed to be drainage that goes west and then back north and over to that other ditch, kind of like the alternative one route that they have here. It's an 8-inch, and there is a catch basin back there, but in heavy flows, that overtops and goes straight through property that's along Graham Road. And they claim that they didn't have any problems with that until the subdivision was put in. So this is just looking at, while we're out there doing some additional grading back on a property to get that water to the road.
So, let me make sure I understand this. In an area that is swampy, that's flat, and that obviously has had, it's not been farmed, there's lots of trees and such in a lot of these areas. We are supposed to understand that they never had any drainage issues in that area. That's what they're saying?
This gentleman's claim was that he did not have problems before they put the subdivision in. That is
But if we did absolutely nothing, he could improve his drainage to get it out to the road.
true.
Okay. That's what I wanted to find out.
So, yeah, we threw that in here as an option, an
Okay.
alternate, just
that's
to,
good.
okay.
Yep, got it. Got it. Okay. We want, is anything else on this report?
So my question is, what do we want to do moving forward?
I was about to ask the same question. I mean,
Well, and just openly discussing it, I would say, I wouldn't want to go on anybody's private property. I would want to improve the roadside ditch, drainage, that would be the limits that I would be, in favor of. You know, I certainly understand trying to go to the south and give ourselves more problems is not the smartest thing to do. We're kicking the can to another problem. So if this is going to relieve other problems and it's going to improve a ditch, a roadside ditch and put a pipe in it, then I think that's a positive from a safety aspect. It's a positive from our drainage to overtop the road, and it protects the roadway. That is worth a lot more than, well, it's got a lot of value to it, and if we don't protect it, it'll deteriorate and continue to have to be repaired. That would be my thought, and I certainly wouldn't do the 17,500. I think that was pretty obvious that I was not in favor of that.
Fair enough. The only, just playing devil's advocate to that, is the way things act now, I guess there is some natural detention time. And if we just piped all that in, we might, we would cause more water to get downstream faster, which could cause flooding. That's just playing the devil's advocate. I'm not saying that that's true. That's a possibility we would need to consider, I suppose. If we just did the roadside ditch without having any control upstream.
Well, it sounds like we've got a report that says it's not necessary. I mean, it says that they don't think. Can you might let us in on who the engineer?
That was Jobs and Henderson.
Okay. Well, I think we ought to. To answer that question, I think that's a good point to bring up. We should verify with them that they are still standing by their report, and they don't need detention. I think that's probably a smart thing to do. And then I feel pretty comfortable with piping the roadside ditch.
Okay.
That's how I would answer that. But I think it's an excellent point to bring up,
Just wanted to bring it up as a
because it will get there
consideration.
faster.
and if we choose that option, we're then saying that the closing off, because we're not going on private property to pipe stuff around any ponds. The closing off of the pond and the flooding of the wetland is going to be between whoever's deciding to close off the pond and however much the wetland backs up until it.
I'd say that's a neighbor and a neighbor problem.
Civil.
It's a neighbor and a neighbor problem, and the ORC is very clear about that. So, and additionally, we don't have any easements, we don't have a right to go back there, and on top of that, I would imagine there's several environmental permits that would have to be to be
To
obtained.
drain a wetland?
Yeah,
Well,
that'd be one.
Maybe.
But just to get in there to work is another.
I was they looked into the permitting a little bit, and because we're not technically draining it, we would still have, control. There'd still be a wetland there. The permitting is much less involved, but yes, still permitting.
Yeah. And again, this is 20 years after this has been built. So, I mean, if it was 2 years after it was been built, I would have a lot more of, hey, we got to go figure out what's going on. This is 20 years after this has been built that we have major issues. So, it seems to me like after the subdivision was built, and I don't know this for a fact, but it seems to me that something was done to cause more problems in those areas.
Yeah, I don't know when it started. I'm trying to remember if anybody said this has been going on for 15, 20 years or not, and that nobody did anything about it or not. I don't know if that was this one or if that was another one.
So, just to wrap this up, so this is in your ramp projects?
No.
Okay, where does this fall in your new, in the revised ideas for the budget?
This was already in the budget. Let me find out which project number it is. It's SVC something 17002. And what we put in for next year's budget is $45,000 for engineering and then $300,000 for construction in 2019.
In 2019.
in 2019. And that was all before, we got the report, the final report, and obviously having this discussion.
And given what we just kind of talked about pipe in the roadside ditch, what do you think? Do you think that that will be revised at all for the engineering? Seeing that you've got topo, you kind of understand what's going on out there. Is there anything more? I mean, not that some of this couldn't be done by this, but let's just say none of it's done by us. We got to have a plan. We bid it out. How much do you think? You think it's still a $50,000 number? You think maybe it's 30?
My guess is it would be lower than 45 because we're not going to have to worry about any right-of-ways or any easements, acquiring any easements. So it would probably be a little bit cheaper than that. We could lower that number some. I always hesitate to lower numbers too much just because I'd hate to, not have enough and then have
Right.
to come back and ask for more.
Understand. Do you guys think we need to do anything as a motion to council on this? I mean, it's at least, or is this another budget discussion?
I think I don't. I'll let Mel talk first.
I think it's more of a budget discussion. I just think that it's going to take more input from other council members before I'd be comfortable making a recommendation to the whole.
For me, I think it's a budget thing, but I also I want to make sure I'm correct in my assumption that what we have discussed here will change the prices of the actual project itself downward
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
significantly, perhaps. And so I'd want to see,
Yeah, the difference.
Maybe, Alan, for the next budget meeting, would you mind going back through this and just maybe doing a quick line item? What would be maybe not included, or put it down below as we call it right-of-way work, non-right-of-way work, and maybe separate the two? Is that the right way to think about it?
Okay, I guess the way I'd envision that is just kind of trying to come up with pull those pieces out and say estimate for just the roadway.
Okay,
if that-
I'm good with that.
I guess.
that's good enough for me.
Do you want to give pluses and minuses to RCP and corrugated pipe?
We prefer, by we, it's the service department, prefer the plastic pipe. It's much easier to work with. It's easier to repair. For us to, say with a 30-inch pipe, for us to repair that is difficult if possible. You have to have larger equipment to handle it, whereas with the plastic pipe, we can handle it with the equipment that we have. Strength is not quite as good, but with the depth that we have, I don't see strength being an issue.
You see
And I don't know that concrete's going to last any longer than the plastic.
any issues with floating in a shallow ditch?
I wouldn't think, I think we'll be deep enough that it wouldn't be an issue.
Okay. Great.
So we'll address this at, in the next budget meeting then, and I'll prepare a rough cost estimate for just drainage along the road.
Sounds good. All righty. If there's nothing else on that, we'll go on to the cable road drainage.
For cable road drainage, Jobs and Henderson provided 3 different cost estimates. All 3 of these cost estimates assume that the work will be done by a contractor and not in-house. And just, I guess, to review the issues, the road is flooding there, or was flooding there. There has been a temporary solution where the tile that ran to the north was repaired, or at least cleaned out, so the water has receded currently. The natural flow of water is believed to go south across Cable Road, but there is not a culvert across there. So the 3 options are, 1, put twin 8-inch culverts across the road. There's not much cover available to put a 12-inch under and have any strength on it, and be worried about it collapsing. So we'd probably go with 2 8-inches to get the cover that we needed. Estimate for a contractor to do it is $14,000. If we wanted to do that in-house, we could probably do it for less than 2,000, would be my assumption. Second option is going east along the north side of Cable Road with just enough, basically putting a catch basin in on the north side of Cable and piping that through a 12-inch to over the hill right next to the South Fork of the Licking, and only piping that insofar as we would need to come out the side of the hill. That was revised from the original that had been taken all the way to the creek, but we would just run that out the side of the hill and probably have to do some ditch work along the north side of Cable to channel that to the creek. And that option's $48,000 for a contractor to do that work. Third option would be to cross the road, set a catch basin on the north, catch basin on the south, and pipe down the south side of the road. That was required a little bit more pipe and a road crossing. And that one came in at just under $60,000.
So, Alan, on that one, the road crossing that you had stated for the 14,000 would not be necessary, correct? So you're including the road crossing in the south side
Correct.
project. So in essence, it's a little bit cheaper than the north side. I mean, if you took the road crossing out, say you put the road crossing in regardless,
Yeah.
just so for safety factor to keep, I'm just trying to understand. The north side one does not need a road crossing, correct?
Correct.
The south one does.
Correct.
And the third estimate of just a road crossing is there because why?
That's just putting culverts in, no, not piping anything to the east.
It says if it heads up, then it's going to go through those 8 inches, it's going to get to the south side, and where it goes from there, it could be in tile, it could be go further back in the field, it could go somewhere else, but we know it'll get across the road.
We know it will get across the road, and that appears to be the natural drainage of the area, right?
Understand. Got it. Okay. And we could do that one for less than $5,000.
In-house,
Yeah.
yes.
Got it.
I know I'd originally liked the idea of taking a pipe to the east along the north side of Cable Road. I was thinking even for a contractor to do that would be less than what these came back at. I did talk to Jason. He would be comfortable doing that in-house and being able to restore that. Would be a lot more comfortable doing it with a track hoe than a backhoe just because of the time consideration, which, as we discussed, we could rent a track hoe. We're planning to do that soon anyhow.
Half the price, do you think?
I mean, without factoring in, basically it's just materials and the cost of the track hoe, plus the wages we're paying the guys already, which is probably a 3-man job, which would take them roughly a week, in my estimation, which I don't know those rates off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say we'd still be able to do that for probably 15 to 20, even if you factored in salaries.
Okay.
And that's the coming out the side of the hill,
Yes.
improving the ditch,
Mhm.
so it flows to the creek.
This is one I've struggled with a little bit, I guess. Like I said, the natural flow appears to go north to south. The problem for us is the road's flooding. So the simple solution is putting a culvert across the road. I initially didn't want to do that because the road's in pretty good shape. Didn't want to cut across it if we didn't have to, and thought we could bring the drainage to the east at a reasonable price. Another part of that is the two landowners are in dispute. And the best solution for everybody would probably be to take the pipe to the east. It allows the guy on the north to drain his field and doesn't affect the guy on the south. With the cost, is it worthwhile to go with the best solution for everybody, or just do what the city needs to do to get the water from point A to point B? And I think, as I mentioned before, there's a slight conflict of interest for me, so that's one of the reasons I brought it to the street committee.
Andy, not that I necessarily think we have a responsibility to the property owners, but that option sounds like a long-term solution to me.
Which one?
The, not just the culvert, but the,
Piping to the east.
yeah, piping to the east. Sounds like that down the line would be better for everyone. And if we could do that ourselves, it would save us significantly. So, I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah, just what I know of it and what I've looked at and talked with Alan about is the topography in there is kind of weird. And really it's taking the water and moving it off the road. And I agree that it won't flood the road, but it'll move it south and it'll settle in another property owner's property if they didn't have field tile, if their field tile wasn't working and so forth. It would just sit south. And right now it sits north of the road, and the topo seems to suggest it would sit south of the road if we just put a culvert across there. So I would hope that we could find the most inexpensive way to get it to the east. And that seems to make the most sense.
I agree.
And the creek is 12 feet below this. What's the elevation between
Oh, at least 12, if not
12? I
20.
mean, it'll race down
It'll
this
run
hill.
down there.
It'll be, we won't have a problem there. And I think that's that's probably
I agree.
a very good answer to this problem. And if we can do it for $20,000, that'd be great. And I think that's what you were kind of thinking it was in-house originally.
Yeah, and if we were going to go that route, we've got money built into the operating funds for pipe and such. And of course, we're already paying the guys. They're going to be doing something either way. So in my mind, that's not really even a CIP project at that point. It's just us scheduling it for, late next spring, early next summer and get the guys out there and just do it.
Agree.
You don't anticipate, does anybody anticipate any problems with setting some type of odd precedent? I mean, my precedent for this is water's on the road, water damages the road, we need to get the water off the road. We're not going around improving people's property necessarily. And so, I don't know if that trips any triggers with anybody. It does it with me, but I don't understand maybe some of the nuances.
Yeah, well, with doing the piping, we're incurring extra cost to, I guess in my mind, help appease the situation between the two landowners. As Andy said, the topography through there, it's really pretty flat. It looks like that to the south of the property to the south, so one property south of that, the water should have originally gone that direction, but somebody built a house there and it looks like they built that up. So that's one part of that. So the owner to the south has a pipe for his drainage tile that goes across another property to go east to get to the creek towards the south end of his property. And then the property on the north, it has a tile that runs north, which goes against the topography. So that would not have naturally drained to the north. So how it ended up that way, no idea. But so again, adding this drainage back to the south is almost like the Graham Road where we're taking, well, this is what it used to do approach, and that might cause us more problems in the future. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does.
And I would wonder if it makes any sense meeting with Alan, you throwing this out there, meeting with the two landowners and asking to see if they'll contribute at all to this project. I would venture to guess that they would be able to do something to help this situation. Just a suggestion.
I will ask.
If you need my help, I'd be glad to help.
I appreciate that.
So. Okay.
Put some notes on that.
Anything else on that one, Tim?
You know what, my only question would be if we all, pending that, to make the determination as to whether or not we're going to make a recommendation that that's where we should go. I don't even know if we need any type of, it'd be nice to hear what they say first, but I don't, it's not like we're chomping at the bit to do this next month, right?
Well, as Alan said, there's a temporary, the tile going to the north was repaired, and it went through a fence row, so it had trees in it, so they had stopped it up. It had been repaired, so is it going to last for a year, 2 years, 3 years? Yeah, probably, somewhere in that ballpark. I mean, this isn't one that would have to happen immediately, but I think it's an issue that if we have the ability to do it, and we have the people in-house, I think it is an in-house job. If we can do it, if Jason's comfortable, then we should do it.
Oh, I agree, totally. We gotta start knocking them off.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise it'll just be 5 years
One
from
on the
now.
list, right?
And it'll be a note somewhere in somebody's meeting notes that it was talked about and
Right.
won't get done.
And I guess with this one, I'm not so much concerned about setting precedent, because if we don't reroute it, we're just switching it to the other side.
Yeah,
We're just
I agree. I just,
causing us problems on the other way. So that's how I would, if I had to justify that to someone, that would be it.
I would agree.
Okay. We're on number 5. If there's anything else on that. Retention, detention, basin inventory and analysis.
Okay, so the first part of that is we don't have the ordinance yet. After meeting with Jim Roberts with Jobs and Henderson, he found that the ordinance that we have is actually close to what we need. It does talk about how there are, for any retention detention pond, a maintenance plan is supposed to be provided to us, and that that's supposed to be followed and such. However, if we
You just step back just a second and talk about what we did to get to this point, how we found out we have 66 detention ponds and so forth. Just kind of give us an overview of that real quick.
Okay, I've received a number, I don't know what that number is, of complaints about different retention and detention ponds throughout the city. So then that's when I built in some money into the budget for 2017 to, as a two-part, to one, do some engineering or have some outside help to locate, identify the problems, and basically take an inventory of everything that is in the city. And then the second part of that is, one, for the ones that are ours, come up with a maintenance plan, and for the ones that aren't ours, determine who is responsible for them, and then get an ordinance on the books to enforce.
That's where I was trying to get to. That's exactly right. Okay, so go.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to ask real quick, what has been the main complaint? Are they all similar, or is it a number of different things?
One of they're different. Either they're not functioning properly, or there's cattails in them and they're flooding, or they're mosquitoes because
Mosquito
they're
patches,
silted in and the water's shallow.
Or they're not having any water in them and we're seeing flooding elsewhere.
Right.
Okay, so that's exactly where I wanted to get. Now go to the ordinance.
So with the ordinance, what we have is close. To my knowledge, we don't have any submitted maintenance plans for any of these stormwater basins. If we do, I don't know where they would be. So what we're looking at for the ordinance is adding a little bit of language to it that basically says, in the absence of a maintenance plan being submitted, that whoever is responsible will follow a prescribed maintenance plan. And then we put a prescribed maintenance plan in there. It basically says, we haven't come up with exactly how that would look. I'm sure there's something out there that's been done, but basically it's maybe some if-then statements. If it's, silted in so much, then it needs dredged, or maybe it's a yearly plan, or, just making sure they're mowed and the cattails aren't there, kind of thing. Any questions on that part of it?
Is it as simple as saying the water's got to get in there and the water's got to get out?
I think it's more involved than that, for things like silting in,
Yeah.
Because water does come in and come out and go out if they're silted in. It's just that you only have, a foot of storage where you're supposed to have maybe 5 feet of storage.
How thick do you think that is that a 2-page document or is it a 20-page document?
2 pages
Okay, good.
max.
Okay.
We're going to be dealing with other issues. Sometimes they have orphic plates. Sometimes they have, sometimes if they've gone new ones to bioswales, to certain vegetation that has to be in those, there's could be all kinds of things that are going to be interesting. But at least it's on the radar now that we know you got to give us a maintenance plan.
Yes.
Okay? So I'm going to jump kind of into the report unless you have anything else about the background.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so it seems like there were a few that they didn't look at. And I'm on page, well, it doesn't really have a page. I'm in the appendix. Well, first, let me ask this question. Were you happy with this report, Alan?
Overall, yes, because
Did it give you what you needed?
it gave me what I needed. And the reality is, now that I have the report, I don't think we're gonna need 25,000 a year to do this. And, in our budget adjustments that you'll see at the next meeting, we've reduced what we need, because we don't have as many as we thought were ours, just because we didn't know what was ours.
Because they wrote really a conclusion, and that's really the report, and then they gave you the appendice. I hope that they gave you a little bit more in maintenance plans than what is in here.
That would be part of the ordinance and working with that for maintenance.
What about for the cities? You know, so what I understood, what we approved was,
Yep.
give us a report, go out and identify all the stormwater features that we have, give us a report on where they are, what they are, who owns them, and I thought that what we spent, what the original contract was for, was maintenance plans for the cities, owned detention features.
And there's only, so the way that they rated this was on a 9-point scale, with 9 being the worst. They only identified specific ones that were a 6 or above. So
Well, can
on the-
I stop you there? Because I'm not sure was related to us, at least, for us that said, yeah, go forward with this, instead of having someone in-house do it, let's go get some professional person to do it. I had understand that all of them were gonna get rated, and all of them were gonna have a maintenance plan, whether they needed maintenance now, or if they need maintenance in the future, we were gonna get a maintenance plan for everything the city owned.
They are all rated. They're not included in here. The only thing that's included in the report is the 6 and above. As far as what the maintenance is, the 6 and aboves are included with what the issues are. And for the ones that are the city's responsibility, there is, well, it says what the issues are, and most of them are pretty obvious what the fix is, and then a cost is associated with those that we believe are ours. So the reality is, there's not many that are the cities, and I can certainly work with Jobs to make sure we're getting maintenance plans for those.
Would you mind just looking at what they were supposed to provide us, as I understood it at least? I believed we were doing kind of a two-part. We were gonna identify them, and then we were gonna say, here's the maintenance plan for them. And for them to pull out, I mean, if we spent, well, I'm gonna leave that alone. If their plan needs cleaned out, full of sediment, I hope you didn't pay very much for that, because we could have done that in a weekend. We could have gone around and found these 8 and said, needs cleaned out, has sediment in it. So I'm hopeful that we have more than that. That's my opinion.
I know you don't like this project. There's no way I could have done this in-house. And got
I
it done
understand.
within 5
I understand, but I was hopeful we were going to get something that said, so Alan, let's just say that you wanted to turn this over to Jason, or you wanted to turn it over to somebody so they could monitor it. They would have something that they could turn to and say, here's my detention pond at Summit Ridge. I know that it's been inspected. I know what has to be done today, and I know it has to be done 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 6 years from now, because I got to put it on a plan. Jason, or whomever you're going to turn this over to, if we're responsible for cleaning out or maintaining our own basins, somebody has to do it. So is now that your responsibility to come up with kind of that directive to the Public Works Department to say, Summit Ridge is going to get cleaned out in 2 years, and here's what we're going to do?
The way, I guess I haven't envisioned us doing much of that work at all, just because of the equipment and the, I guess, specialty of it. It's not something that we typically would do. So I had envisioned it being contracted out, and that's what the money in the budget was for. As far as a maintenance plan, honestly, I'm not terribly familiar with what a maintenance plan for a retention or detention pond looks like. It seems like there's a lot of fluctuation to them, and in my mind, the ordinance is going to say, if this, then that, or we can have a chart or a table that is either referenced or part of the ordinance that says, per one, or maybe it's not going to be a per each because they're all a little bit different, but maybe at 80% silted in based on that pond, that's when it needs dredged, or whatever that number is.
Okay, so here's kind of what I'm kind of coming back to, and I don't want to monopolize this discussion, but here's what I'm coming back to. If we don't have a maintenance plan, how can we expect the owners of other detention ponds to give us a maintenance plan that we can accept? So, for instance, if you had one nice, pretty picture of the Summit Ridge detention pond, here's what we got to do. Here's our maintenance plan, and somebody from Falling Leaf Homeowners Association brings in a sentence that says, needs cleaned out, full of sediment, and you say, no, that's not a maintenance plan, we can then say that, because we can say, here's a maintenance plan, here's an example. That's what I'm trying to get to is, if we don't have one, how can we expect someone else to give us one? I mean, if we don't have, right
guess I'm
now,
not
so what you're
following.
telling me is we don't have a maintenance plan for any of the detention ponds we own.
Not specifically.
Okay. When we don't have a maintenance plan for any of the ones that somebody else owns, that they were supposed to supply to us.
True.
Okay. So my point being is, how do we tell them, we need your maintenance plan, when we don't have one ourselves to show them what we're expecting? What are we expecting as a maintenance plan?
That's what I think we're not. So the ordinance would have some kind of chart either attached to it, and that chart is going to be the maintenance plan. I don't really think it's necessary to have a maintenance plan for every single basin because they're, in general, the same items. So, if there's cattails, they need cleaned out. If it gets to so much percent silted in, it needs dredged. If the control structure is deficient, fix the control structure. I guess I don't see it as being that specific to each one that we need to go into that much detail other than to provide that.
Some of them have orifice place
Yes.
plates. Some of them have structures, they have leveling structures, so you have to clean those out when they get full of sediment. I guess that's what I was hopeful we would get out of this. I mean, I feel like, and I wasn't a big fan of this project, as you mentioned. Going out and saying, there's a pond, and it's got some cattails in it, I don't really want to bring up that we contracted out for more than that, but I think we did contract out for more than that. I understand there's a GIS level of this, and you guys have them now mapped, 66 of them. That's great. I had no idea we had 66 of them, nor did I think anybody here knew that. But I was hopeful that we would at least have it for ours, that we would have some expectation of what we plan on doing for maintenance, even if it's one plan. We should at least have that. I guess that's what I was hopeful for through this project. Besides understanding where they were in physical location in our city. Okay, I'm going to leave it alone. That's fine.
Well, I would just ask, my understanding was that what the ordinance says is if you have not submitted a plan to us, you will follow this plan.
Correct.
And that's what needs to be written.
Yes.
And I understand Mr. Walters is saying for the entire scope of the contract, maybe we should go back and look and make sure that wasn't in the scope.
I certainly felt it was.
So,
Right.
I mean, that may be worth looking at, but we're not necessarily asking them to provide them to us. My understanding was we were just going to say, this is what has to be done because you did not submit anything to us. Understand you. It looks like you're looking at it now, so
I'm looking at the agreement now.
I'll stop talking while you do that.
Yeah, because
Well, if
my
you-
understanding was recommendations, and I think we have, to some extent, recommendations. Now, the one, say, at Amherst Village might take a little bit more to get a contractor on board. We might have to show him just a little bit more detail, but I guess I envision that as part of the, dollars per year in doing each one.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm not looking for an answer right now. We're there. We're hopeful to get the ordinance written so we can move forward with that. I would ask that maybe for the next street committee meeting, we can have at least an idea of what the maintenance plan that the ordinance is going to call for. That would be good. I think we can start with that.
Okay. Yeah, and we've talked about being mid-November, having that ready to go.
Okay.
So I would imagine that would be before the next street committee meeting.
Gotcha.
That notwithstanding, there are a couple of citizens who are particularly interested in this because they feel that some of the ones that are contained in the appendix as a 9 or an 8 are causing them regular problems.
Yes.
When is it appropriate to begin to move to talk to those? Because we told those citizens, hang on, we're waiting for an inventory and we're waiting for a grade, essentially. And if I own Tim's Steakhouse and I have a retention pond out back and it's not working and the water is flowing over Bob's property and he's been patiently waiting, when is the right time to contact Tim's Steakhouse and say, hey, you need to fix this? We now have the inventory, we now have the ranking. It's time to start the dialogue. Would you recommend waiting until the plan's in place, or can they take place on a dual track?
My thought was to wait until we had the ordinance in place to approach the owners to make sure that we said, hey, yeah, you do need to do this. Is there merit in going now? Could be. I'm not adverse to that. Just thought that we could go and ask them, and they could tell us to pound sand. I figure with the ordinance in hand, then they wouldn't really have that option.
What about the ones that we own? Could we at least get those started? I mean, there's some not, obviously, there's some in this list that are ours. We're going to be responsible for cleaning them out. They're listed as a couple of 8s, a couple 6s. So, and I'm calling it city responsibility because some of them are unknown, but there's a couple 8s, there's a couple 6s that could still be completed in this fall, I would assume, if there is 20, $23,000 available to do so.
We have $15,000 remaining for this year. So the top 4 are the ones that we're concerned about.
Right.
The ones in Hazelwood and the Brooks Edge is a missing orifice plate. That's pretty easy. Hazelwood, we didn't find, it appears, a specific owner for that. But being with Hazelwood, there's HOAs up there, and my thought would be to try and get with them to get them to maintain that. And then the 2 that would be our responsibility that I would like to get to first are the Amherst and Summit Ridge. The challenge with the Amherst one is that's going to require some seeding, and honestly, I was hoping to have this earlier in the year so that we could get something more done this year and still have time to get seeding. And we could probably get something like a winter ride just to hold, do the work, get it to hold for the winter, and then come back and reseed in the spring. Which I've been trying to figure out if that's the way we want to go or not.
Well, I agree. Hazelwood, we should be able to find somebody. It's relatively new.
Seems that way.
And then we actually are still working in that area, so I would think somebody would be able to step up to that one.
I would think so too. I know with the one in Brooks Edge, it's not it's actually on private property. It's not in a specific dedicated area. And the HOA has pretty much declined to do anything about it. So that one, I don't know how to get around that other than to just do it. But with Hazelwood, I haven't looked into it that far yet. Obviously, we just got this last week. So I would think we'll be able to get somebody to own that one.
When these guys looked at plats and such, I mean, we know we have easements to get on this property, correct? We can get to each one of these?
I guess I haven't verified that, but I would assume.
Okay. That'd be
Yeah, because there's almost
trotting
always,
out there. We probably ought to make
there's
sure.
almost always a storm sewer coming into it, so there's a way to get to it through the storm sewer easement.
Right. Okay. Well, and yeah, I agree with Tim. I know that anybody who's been asking about these problems have been told, hey, we're doing a big project here. We're figuring it out. And I mean, as of your last report to council, we were still planning on doing stuff in the fall. So I'd probably try to. I agree. If we can get to a couple of these to get them, if we've got $15,000 to spend on, let's go pick out the ones we can get done that are ours and get them done. Even if it means putting down some winter rye, I think that's the right thing to do. Go ahead.
And additionally, I think, I know we don't have the ordinance in hand yet, but maybe some of those that are rated very high, where we have, active complaints, it would be proactive to go ahead and go out and talk to the owner and explain, maybe they already know, but tell them this is what's in the works and see if there wouldn't be some encouragement for them to go ahead and start, making some of those, getting it cleaned up, or at the very least, we can show the other citizen that we're working on it. Just a thought.
Okay. So what I'm hearing then is, go ahead and try and do, it'll probably be Amherst and Summit Ridge. Try and go ahead and get something done on those, and then start talking to entities to encourage them to start doing maintenance before we
Before they're forced to,
before they're forced to.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that, and I don't think we have to take that to council and make that recommendation,
Agree. I agree.
so. And it was kind of the plan anyhow. Let's get our plan together and then spend the other 15 on getting it done. Or getting as much as possible we can get done. Okay.
And
In the
then-
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, to finalize that, in the agreement, there is a development of maintenance plan. So I'd envisioned that as part of the ordinance, but we'll work to make sure that we're getting.
I'm sure you
something
guys can
that's-
figure out how to do it. It's not, as you said, it's not a big thing. If we have the maintenance agreement, or at least the ordinance put together, we can at least come up with a kind of a plan, a maintenance idea of what we want. That's all. I'm
Okay.
hopeful for a little more, but that's okay. It's hope. It's all about hope. So let's move on. In the essence of time, I think 6:30, is that everybody's stopping point? So let's kind of move along, and I'm going to go on to Bristol Drive, number 6.
Bristol Drive. I reached out to Stantec, and they did provide me what they had. And in your packet, there's a copy of that. And that is a very preliminary cost estimate based off of a very preliminary proposed French drain system. I did reach back out to Stantec. I thanked them for providing this and asked if there was any survey that ever went along with this, and I never got any response. My guess is there was never any survey done to prove that this was actually work, that it was just come up with as a rough idea, that appears to be what we've got, and this is all they have.
Will you mind looking to see what Stantec invoiced us for on this one? And see if we can find an invoice that would detail that? Because I'll bet you, well, I won't bet you, I would venture to guess that they probably did a little bit more than, at least what I've seen with Stantec is they went ahead and spent the money for their purposes. I'd really be interested if there's any topo on this.
Yeah, and I will, hopefully they'll get back to me and say yay or nay. I will look for an agreement. I'll see if I can find one.
Yep, sounds good. I understand.
I keep all mine electronically, and I know where they're at. The
Yep.
old ones,
Do we?
don't know.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of speed through this just a little bit. The storm sewer that they've got existing storm shown here, have we looked in those at all? I'm confused to why we're running a parallel line along the storm sewer system that's on 315 on 333. Why are we running a new drain when we could pop into each one of those? If those catch basins, if those 2x2s are there, why could? And this thing's a foot deep.
They're not deep enough to accept any kind of under drain.
So
And I have my doubts whether the existing ditch is deep enough to accept any kind of under drain. And without survey, it's all, from walking it, that's my observation. Without survey, I can't say yay or nay, but
I see. So that line going, that existing storm sewer going back, that's less than a 12-inch?
no, it's bigger than 12-inch.
Okay. The reason why, then it's got to be, I don't necessarily disbelieve you. I'm just asking the question because if it's a 12-inch, then our French drain would be 12 inches down, 6 inches buried, 12 inches down. We could get into those catch basins if that's a 12-inch going through there, because it's got to have some cover on it,
Right.
even if it's an inch. I mean, anyhow,
I see your point.
again, I don't know how much Stantec looked into this and really gave it a lot of thought, but I'm wondering why they did what they did here. That was the first question, because an estimate of $120,000 is kind of is tough to believe for a French drain system that's 2,000 feet at best.
I think it's just all the driveways. I don't know do they have boring in here? I think they might have had
They
some
did.
boring.
They had borings in here. Directional drill, 600 feet.
Yeah, looks like seeding and mulching was a bigger, yeah.
And they've got all kinds. When you get to the water lines, is there a water main that has to be lowered that they anticipated?
Good question.
I mean, so those are the kind of details that we just have to figure out on this before we get too far down the line here. $120,000 is nuts, and that's just He's got $4,500 in here to, $4,500 to bid this. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be very nice to Stain Tech, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess I still struggle with, I looked in the catch basins and I just don't, there's not much cover on those pipes, and getting an under drain under there, we'll look again. I guess the other side of this is, how big is the problem? From what I've discovered, there's ditches out there that are at minimum slope, and there's a couple places, standing water is what I was told the issue was, and we did observe one place where there was some standing water. So one, I guess, how far do we want to go, or how much do we want to do? Is it just some standing water? Are there other methods to get rid of that? One of the things that I was considering is, could we just line do like a little concrete liner between from driveway culvert to driveway culvert, so that it doesn't scour out. I think that's the problem. The ditch is scoured, and so it just lays wet there. I don't have any survey, so I can't prove that, but it'd certainly be a lot cheaper than trying to put in an under drain system. Just run a concrete channel. I wouldn't want to pipe any of it in specifically. I think we'd run into more problems with flooding from it holding water back, and there'd really be no cover on any of the pipes, and it'd probably just flood the road instead of the ditches.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll look to find an agreement, see if there's any kind of survey, and see what that tells us, and go from there.
It had some tree removal and some other stuff. Are there trees growing in this ditch, or is that what this idea
My
was?
guess is that would be, because I didn't spend a whole lot of time looking at this, but my guess is in that proposed permanent easement is where they're looking at.
I mean, just so you see, they want to do a stormwater prevention pollution plan on this project. That was in their proposal for this.
I guess technically it's more than a half acre disturbed. Is that what triggers this?
I bet you it's, it's 1 acre total, but I don't think we're getting there. So anyhow, this is just.
Well, no, I have my doubts about all.
Yeah, I appreciate that you found it all, and that's good, and maybe we can find some more details from them, but boy, I'm glad nobody went forward with this and spent $120,000 on it,
You and me both.
because this is crazy, in my opinion. But I'm hopeful if there is a problem, we can solve it, and I think that if we could enlist, go out there and get some, see if we got topo first of all, so that we can tell if we can get this thing to grade right, because maybe it's a full function and not graded correctly. If there's a deepening of a storm system that we have to get back to the creek, maybe that's what has to happen. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think we ought to at least spend a little bit more time on it and get some good answers to get a solution to it. Any other questions from it? I mean, we don't. It's kind of raw detail. $4,000 to lower a water line.
Yeah, like I said, this was all fresh. That it came up with the one resident. There was another resident that was out there when we chatted with them. Of course, another resident came out and said that they weren't really that concerned about it. So.
Seems to be par, where certain individuals are. It's happened at least in 2 other places in the city, where some people are extremely concerned about it. Some people right across the road say, "I'm not." So.
Yeah, just basically mentioned cost of benefit analysis there, at least consideration.
I appreciate you. Yeah, I do appreciate you digging into it, because we got to dig into it and figure out what we got to do there. Yep. Any other questions on that? All right. One of my favorite topics, Columbia Road culvert replacement. Are we starting anytime soon?
I reached out, I reached out to our CA team. They reached out today to them. They're supposed to start the 31st that week. That's as good information as I have right now.
It was the 16th.
It was originally the 16th.
And before that, it was the 2nd, I think.
Yes, it was.
So how is this affecting our completion date? I know this is an obvious question, but how is this affecting our contractual completion date?
We gave plenty of time. I don't remember what it was.
I remember a 45-day is this one, and 75 is across the road.
It was a 45-day for the closure. I think the total project had, I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't think I have that with me. I want to say it was like 75-day or at least 60 days that we gave them total. So I think they're well within that. I'll double check.
My biggest issue is, are they planning on paving it this year? And if they do, you know, Thanksgiving is really your last sure thing to have asphalt.
Yeah, I think that they're, once they have the culvert, which I know is part of the problem with the Taylor Road one, they had to wait to get the culvert and get that fabricated, and they've got a cure for it since it's concrete. I think once they get in there, they're not thinking it's going to take them very long. At least that's what they're thinking.
I would hope not. Is this a four-sided box?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no footer. So there's no, are there wing walls on this?
Yes.
Precast?
Yes.
All right, good. All right, well, that will go quickly. All right. Great. Let's encourage them to get going, I guess.
I keep checking in. Yeah.
Okay, Taylor Road.
Taylor Road again.
Well, did anybody have any comments or questions
No.
on Columbia? Good.
Taylor
Taylor
Road. I
speak for Mel.
called again. I called last week. I called again today. Just got a voicemail. I haven't got a call back from our contractor, so I will be continuing. I'm going to find somebody else to call probably tomorrow.
Who's the contractor?
Jaw Excavating.
Never heard of them. That's not good.
They're out of Newark. We've worked with them before, is my understanding.
Okay. Okay.
Last you heard on that, they were waiting on something.
The concrete pipe to cure, but that cure period should be about over from the last conversation we had. So they no, that's the other one. On Columbia Road, they do have a piece of equipment down there.
Well, I know Layton. I'm not worried about them. They'll get it. Just I'm worried about them getting paving down.
Gotcha.
But the equipment looks nice right there. Really does. We might decorate it for Halloween.
There you go.
Okay. Anything else on Taylor?
And of course, on both of those, we will make sure public notice gets out.
Well, let me ask a quick question. Let me just go back just Columbia Road for a second. The other one. How is that progressing? I know it's not on our list right now, but you know, if there's a silver lining to this, we may get one of these done fast, or get one of these done and then, you know, be in the middle of the other one.
Last I checked, it was progressing on schedule. ODOT's managing that one. I've just stopped in and checked here and there. They did run into a slight, they had to extend the pilings on the south side. They didn't get to, you know, good soil,
Right.
didn't get the blows per foot. But I don't even think that really delayed them. I think they're moving along pretty good. I'll double check and report on that at council.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Now into fun stuff. Ramp. How about a 2017 ramp update?
Just a second, make sure I get all the notes here. There's very little left to do on the 2017 ramp. There's some backfill around some concrete driveways on Township, and I think that's about all on the punch list. We are working to finalize the quantities. They should be submitting a pay application soon. I actually just talked to them today. There's one item we're disputing. Aside from that, it's pretty much ready to go. I haven't seen the final numbers, but I'm anticipating rough savings of, I'm going to say it's going to be at least $125,000 over the bid price. So total on the project, being that we originally budgeted $650, we put it out. The
598 was
it was $598 for the contract. So total
50,000
project
in
cost, we're going to have $150,000 to $200,000 total savings.
Does that include the 50,000 in contingencies that we had in there?
Yes.
Okay. That sounds good. I mean, it sounds right. That'd put it about right.
Yeah, because we didn't end up needing really any of the
Yeah.
contingencies.
They did less undercuts on Township, so that was good. Great. Well, that's great. That's so much better news than usually the other way.
Yeah, and the only thing we non-performed was along Creek and Mill, doing where we're going to shave that hillside down and straighten out the sidewalk and improve the drainage. We realized we needed to improve the drainage a little bit more, which we can do in-house early next year, and then capture that along with Mill Street and Creek in 2018 is what I'm proposing at least.
Okay. Great. So, you know, the last council meeting, I kind of challenged you to say, hey, since all this savings, can we look at, or is it worth looking at, increasing the budget for the ramp in 2018? So with that, number 10, 2018 ramp.
So for 2018, I've currently proposing it right at $650,000. with the idea, as BJ and Jamie stated, they were a little more comfortable with waiting until next year till we had actual savings dollars or numbers. And then we could add to it as we see fit. I certainly would welcome that. So right now, what I'm looking at for 18 is what we originally had in for 18 was Headley's Mill. We had 450 on that. I think we can do it for about 400,000 by doing a leveling, about a 1-inch leveling course, and then a chip seal on that. Second one would be Summit Road. Originally, that was not in the 2018, but when we looked at that last year, I looked at it as the whole of Summit Road instead of the parts of Summit Road. And the part of Summit Road that's really bad is from Broad to the tracks, and that did have a higher rating than the rest of it, so proposing putting that in for next year's ramp. Then that would be about 125,000. And then the final piece would be finishing there at Mill and Creek, including the parking lot there at the municipal park. So doing Mill, Creek, doing our drainage first, and then straightening out that sidewalk so that we can get a curb in there for the drainage. And that's all, and repaving all that at roughly 125,000. So those three would add up to the 650, which is a little bit different than what we had last year. We had a couple other things in there, which were basically micro surface, which I think we can hold off on. And I know there were some specific questions about when we were getting to other ones. And then what I've looked at for 2019 would be potentially Cleveland Road, Pat Haven Drive. I think we can do something similar to what we did on Applewood. Just mill some of that out and add a little crown to it, and we might be able to keep that one together. Potentially Park Street, and I did have Graham Road written down also, although I'm not 100% on that one. And then the second part of 2018 was if we had more money, what I would propose would be doing some chip seal as one consideration, which would be Old Maids Lane and Allward Road. Both of those are starting to have some significant cracking, and if we put a chip seal on those, we could hold them together for a while.
Okay. One that I would point out to you with the issue with the gates being closed at Foundation Park, McIntosh looks like it's taking quite a beating. And I wondered, I know it's later in your ramp, like 4 or 5 years from now, I believe.
It's not even showing up, other than a Durapatch for this year, which we did do some Durapatching on this year.
It was one that I was thinking in my head was, kind of as a reaction to that, with the gates being closed, that road may need to be further improved. I think would needed look at. Would take a look at it. I don't know if everybody agrees with that. It's really getting beat up, and because the truck traffic has to use it now.
Well, yeah, I've driven it every 2 or 3 times a week,
I was on it today. It is.
and
rough.
it's rough, yeah.
And the other part of it is it's hard to see in certain areas. There's some little humps and bumps in it. Not that you're going to take care of those now, but you may want to just kind of take a look at that and see your vertical sight distance too, or horizontal sight distance. You've got a couple places where it's really bad.
Yeah.
Just something to think about. I don't know that those things can be done right now, but even if a new berm is put on this, or you're familiar with it. It's getting chewed up pretty bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other suggestions on the ramp? I think the ramp's pretty solid, money wise, and just the idea, what you have on your ramp. I've looked at them; they're definitely ready to be worked on. And I think the next ones up are ready to be worked on too. But we got to do them 1 year at a time.
Only other thing I wanted to mention that I had in my notes was on Headley's Mill, trying to reduce or to save money on that one. We did a bunch of tree trimming already this year. There's roughly, we currently don't have a culvert inventory, at least not that I've found or aware of. So we're starting to get that. The first part of that was we went out and looked at all the culverts on Headley's Mill. There's about 10 of them, plus or minus, that we need to replace. All of those are 12 to 24 inch, so we should be able to do that ourselves. Planning to start that. We might be renting a track hoe here in the near future to start doing those now to try and keep ahead of that. And then there will be some base repairs, but I think with our mill and our paving equipment, we can handle the base repairs, and that'll also be a savings for us to try and keep that number a little bit lower to redo Headley's Mill.
Will you try to do both? Are you going to try to do base repair this fall, or try to do it in the spring?
It would be spring.
Yeah, that way they'll show up. They'll grow 10% by spring.
Probably.
So, okay. Anything else on that? All right, other business? I've got 30 seconds, so this is going to be great. Subdivision regulations. So I've gone through what we were given in subdivision regulations, and I wanted to make sure you've looked at these and given your feedback to Scott and everybody about that.
Scott and I worked together probably every other Tuesday for about 2 hours. We sat down and wrote those. So I have had a lot of input into those. I have not done a review now that he put the whole thing together to make sure it captured everything that we were looking for. But
Would you, when you do a review on it, would you look at one issue? And one issue on that is a calendar, essentially, for these reviews. And I know that what I'm getting at is, if we take a plan in, a construction plan in, do we have infinite amount of time to look at it, or do we have 2 weeks to look at it? In this subdivision regulation, there is nothing that says, and maybe that's by design.
yes, it is.
It probably is, but I don't know that that's fair. So I'm just asking, if you go anywhere, if you go at other places, their subdivision regulations will stipulate, we're gonna have 30 days review, we're gonna have, 21 days review, we're gonna have 14 days review even. Just kind of take a look at it.
Well, I'll tell you where it came from on that is effectively I don't have any assistance. I mean, Jobs does a review, the retainer engineer. I review them also. My thought on that is, it's ours, so it's mine. It's not theirs. They look at it, and I guess along with that, 2 sets of eyes is better than one. There hasn't been one, and no offense to Jobs, there hasn't been one yet that they caught everything that is on my mind. So every one of them, I've had additional comments, which I think is a good thing to make sure that we're getting what we need, even if it's just something as simple as Nate doesn't want copper pipe on the service lines, he wants plastic because the copper rots out. With me not having any staff administratively, that takes me time to get to. And that's why I like having it in there, that open-ended, I guess. I know some of them stretched out to about 2 months. Usually we'll get back to them within about 30 days.
Okay.
And in my mind, I guess development's not priority number one, so that's why it stretches out too.
Well, okay. As Jamie said, if it's a subdivision and it's what our future residents are going to be, I think I look at it a little differently. I think that there's some contract essentially when you come in to develop in a city that, hey, we're going to take this much time to do it. There's going to be a review. You can expect your review time to be 30 days, even if it's just 30 days. Something that they can count on that says this is what and conversely, they can't say, hey, we want it in 2 weeks. You can say, look, the ordinance says 30 days. That's what I get to anyhow. So just take it under consideration, I guess. Last item, I know in the last item for me at least, in the last council meeting, we talked about some issues you were having with contractors and owners as far as enforcement. I noticed out on Broad Street, on Friday, they destroyed, the silt fence got just taken out. Not that it was all there to begin with, but it's gone now. I'm wondering, did you have problems with them getting that back in? Because
we were having problems with Broadmoor.
Okay.
There was a violation notice given to them, and actually over the weekend they have addressed the issues. I was told that all these issues were addressed.
well, I drove by it today at 3 o'clock, and and it's raining. So on top of that, you've got erosion issues, and you've got violations that didn't get, anyhow. I was wondering if anything if I know we talked about it in the last council meeting, and you guys were gonna step up the procedure, and that's one that I just noticed that, I wondered if it got resolved.
Yeah,
Because at 3
technically-
o'clock today, there wasn't a soul out there, and there wasn't a stitch of silt fence in the ground,
Okay.
at least along Broad.
Yeah, and I haven't been out there.
Okay. And I know they were trying to get their
Technically, with
widening in before it
violation,
rained.
They have until, I want to say Thursday, to get that all addressed.
Well, I think you're going to find that they're going to have more violations because they didn't get them addressed, because they're going to have silt in the ditch. They're probably going to have silt off-site. I know you're stepping it up, and I'm hopeful whoever the inspector is out there is stepping it up, because Saturday he should have been hitting them over the head saying we're going to have an inch of rain Monday. Anyhow, I'm sure he is, but just
Yeah.
letting you know that's what I saw. Okay.
We're getting people in court, and
Yeah, well, they'll get upset when there's silt off-site and on somebody else's property. They're going to be, then the EPA gets on them. So, okay, we'll leave it at that. Anything else, committee?
No.
Alan, anything else you want to, anything we forgot? Probably.
let's see, I was looking over the notes from last time. Foundation Park, path around the gates.
Yeah.
So my understanding is we already have basically like a wood chip path around the gates. So I was going to ask if is that sufficient, or do we want to take the wood chips out and put some grindings down?
My suggestion would be take the wood chips out and put some grindings down. And the reason why is because they get saturated and they rot out, and we're not going to want to be out there all winter throwing wood chips on. I would suggest, do you have any asphalt millings?
I think we might have some.
I would probably, that is by far your best, that's the best stuff you can use for that kind of, if you wanted to. That's what I would use. It's cheap, and it can be utilized, and as long as you guys are rolling over it and packing it down, they'll get their bicycles over it, and they'll get their feet walking over it.
I guess the rest of the trail around there is all mulch, so that's.
I know. Well, I'm hopeful that can change eventually with funding. Because it is, you go walking around there after a rain, and it's a mushy mess. But
Yeah, I've had a
it
complaint
is what
about
it is
that.
right now. It's better, what it's got right now. Now funding, that's what we have. So, all righty. Thank you, Alan.
Yep.
Motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second,
Walther?
Yes.
Hicken?
Yes.
Carter?
yes.